Fantastic. Good day, everyone. We all agree, and when we look at the last 10 years, we are living in very interesting times, and it got more interesting in the last probably couple of years. It started with the fourth industrial revolution and its large number of emerging technologies that have been reshaping our lives and every industry, and combined with printing lots of money by different governments, causing one of the longest economic expansion cycles in history, then being hit sorry, by COVID, that's why I'm coughing, causing, in addition to many issues, major supply chain disruptions. So the geopolitical intensities around the world, with the Ukrainian war, inflation, Europe struggling, and of course the US and the rest of the world waiting for the recession. This brings us to the topic of this presentation, which is there's so much history to record only if you look at the last few years. And even when you're listening to me, you probably had in your mind some points, the way I said them, you probably noticed some bias, some generalization, and some may go to the extreme of accusing me of corrupting the history events. But this is our topic today on how to use the emerging technologies to actually do a better job in preserving and in recording history. This topic is, for me, was very interesting and I wanted to talk about it. It's actually different. I'm a technologist, so I'm going to be talking from a technology point of view. I'm not going to do any judgments or any on history recording or anything like that. But really, as you know, that what was happening with emerging technologies, it changes the way we do any industry, and it's impacting our lives. And this presentation, in my presentation, I'll have two parts. One, we will focus on the technologies and how they are changing the game of preserving the history of humanity, while the second part will focus on moving forward. How can we do a better job in recording the history events, and at least have more complete picture of the history, taking different point of views and not be centralized and having one single point of view. So with that, let's start by defining what is historic preservation, and really what historic preservation usually champions and protect places and assets. I'm going to call them assets, historic assets, which is actually anything that give us a view on history and tell us stories of the past. The American Historical Association define preservation as identification, evaluation, physical preservation, and interpretation of history and cultural significance. Just by looking at that, you can see how technology can actually play a role in almost every stage. In many ways, the most important part of this definition is how we interpret history and how we put significance on what we are actually seeing. Over the past decades, and accelerated in the past probably 3 or 4 years by COVID, is the growth of virtual means of communication. We're like right now, we're using Zoom, and you know, we got almost everyone now is a master in Zoom and MS Teams and Slacks, etc. And that allow us that growth in the virtual means of communication, digitalizing all this information and use of technology, have increasingly visualized the preservation of what we are. I mean, you can actually go back and look. This call is being recorded. So you have an historical record of this core that you can actually look at. And that became an accelerated in the last few years, as you know. Never before we have been forced so drastically to look and how work interact with the world, and specifically with history preservation in completely virtual way, creating an appropriate and meaningful virtual method for people to interact with historic places is paramount for the future preservation. And I'll be talking a little bit, I'll give you some examples to understand this. Of course, when we are talking about preservation of history, we are discussing cultures in all its disciplines. We talk about language, religion, preservation of language, religion, music, the way that people wear clothing, the way they interact, etc. The economy of the societies and in the different parts of the humanities, infrastructure, architecture, and others. It is preserving human history, the recorded one, which we have a record for about 5,000 years of human history, and the technologies are allowing us to uncover and discover the history that is not recorded, because we really have interesting technologies that allow us to do just that. So if we look at just the different stages very quickly, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but when we look, for example, on the identification and evaluation of the history preservation, when it comes to identification and evaluation, there is an important technology. It's called LiDAR, and this LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging, or somebody else would say it's laser imaging detection and ranging. But they both are short by LiDAR. And what LiDAR allow you to do, which is really very interesting, is scanning technology. And it can scan large cities using drone technologies, and it can give us a very accurate 3D model for a large city, or even it allows us to go to very narrow places and uncover interesting new things. If you couple that with the GIS data that we have, 3D models and GIS data, you get a great simulations of not only what we see, but actually the sounds. There are technologies that allow us to do the sound. So we can actually hear and see the past, which is tremendously interesting, and it's amazing what the scientists are doing in this area. For example, I think last week we all read that the archaeologists in Egypt discover a tunnel that may lead to the long lost tomb of Cleopatra. That's just one area where they use technology to uncover new things that they actually, without this kind of technology, they couldn't uncover before. Of course, in identifying and evaluating these historical assets, scientists use tremendous emerging technologies. It starts with the digitization that allow you to collect this huge amount of data sets, and then you make it available, searchable, and allow scientists from around the world to collaborate. And the interesting part here is you don't have to actually ship this fragile assets, documents, pieces of archaeology around, but actually you can make this data and this 3D models available, and you can share it, and scientists can actually work on it and collaborate from around the world. This 3D model of ancient documents, even the documents, they do 3D model on it to study it very well, allow you to study the documents in different parts of the world without having to actually risk these documents. It can sit in a museum in Egypt, and it can be studied by scientists all around from different countries. Of course, collecting so much data about the history of a certain area or a history even of a location creates a huge, large data sets. So the data of big data and artificial intelligence data sciences that specialize in learning these data, like pattern recognition and data mining and other artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies allow us to learn so much about these assets. You can actually deciphering ancient manuscripts with image processing, machine learning, right through to the recent 3D modeling of priceless artifacts. I think we all read about Lion of Mosul, which actually they use this technology to do the 3D modeling for it. Technology is bringing us closer to and widening the horizon of our understanding of these technologies. In addition, there are dead languages where basically have been spoken in the past and they got lost and they're no longer spoken. Actually, the AI researchers brought them back. There is a lot of great research in this area in MIT in the US, and they actually were they developed a system in the computer science department with artificial intelligence laboratory was able to automatically decipher a lost language that previously could not be understood. The algorithm that they used was trained on insights from historical linguistics and typical changes in the sound of languages as they evolve. So a lot of interesting things happening in the identification and the evaluation. Then we have the physical preservation. If you look at the top picture in the slide, you actually see half was actually a statue, the other half was done through the model to actually complete that statue. And then on the left-hand side, you have a very, very important document that is actually being preserved through the technology. So when it comes to physical preservation of the historical assets, this fragile assets, of course, we need to use a lot of long list of technologies, and you will be surprised actually when you see some of these technologies that they use in this preservation. The digitization of the documents, for example, is playing a key role just to make it available. But then you actually can do a 3D printing, which allow it to model the whole even document or statue. Then you can use, if you are looking at a bigger historical site, you can use Internet of Things and smart sensors to understand it. Some scientists use neural networks and hyperspectral imaging creates, even if you look at a manuscript, you can actually create different layers so you can actually study it and find the complete missing pieces of that asset. Then you collect all that data in very large data sets, and then you have this big data that you can do analytics on it, and you can do mining through also artificial intelligence, etc. As an example of that, researchers at British artificial intelligence firm DeepMind trained an algorithm on around 60,000 ancient Greek texts from across the Mediterranean that were written between 700 BC and 500 AD. On its own, the algorithm is called Ethica, was able to restore the text with more than 60% accuracy. According to New Scientist magazine, working with historians, that success rate grew to more than 70%. So that's an example how the DeepMind used the artificial intelligence to actually allow us to understand what we couldn't understand before. Then we go to the most important stage in the preserving of history, which is the interpretation of historical and cultural significance, how do we understand what we have in front of us, and how significant is it in making us understand that culture or that history. Of course, this is because of its importance, huge list of technologies are used to understand it, interpret and make sense of it, and ensure, of course, accuracy. For this, we need, of course, first the collaboration and availability of technologies such, you start with the digitization and 3D modeling again, and the digitization, and the large data sets and the big data and the analysis, the AI, the machine learning, all this comes to play. As an example of that, in Netherlands, researchers and the University of Groningen used AI to correct our interpretation and make a new discovery about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I brought this example because in this region, it matters. They did from the 4th century BC, when they found those scrolls, it was believed that one person wrote this, and there was certain understanding for this from the oldest manuscripts of the Bible. In Netherlands, they actually discovered that using computer techniques and AI, they were able to conclude that the scrolls were written by 2 people, not one, which is amazing, with not one person, and they have a completely different understanding than the previous one. So this is an example where AI made us understand issues better. So this concludes my first part of the presentation, and I go now to the second part, where we talk about recording of history. And we have issues with recording of history, and it depends on who you ask. You find a lot of people have a lot of discussions there. But so far, we have been recording for 5,000, I think, years. Humans have been recording history, and we always have an important question. Every time you read something, what's the first question come to your mind? Can history be trusted? Do I trust this source who wrote actually this history? And why you ask this question is because of the way we record the history. The way we record the history threatens the credibility of these records by the possibility of tampering. And if you ask psychologists, if they're sociologists, they will tell you a lot about this tampering through different areas. We have, of course, some history suffers incompleteness, corruption by certain people, and most of it is the centralization, which is when you look at this, you think right away of a technology that we've been talking about it probably the whole week, right? So this centralization, when you centralize the history and record it, it's usually biased by that authority that actually centralized that. The bias comes from generalization, conspiracy theories, myths, mythology, nationalism, nostalgia toward the past. All these actually do corrupt history. You'll hear even a very famous phrase that says history is written by victors. So basically the people who win a war, a major war, they write the history because they can, right? Because they won the war. And you sometimes, and a lot of times, you don't really hear the other side about the war from the people who lost that war. But is it true? Is the history written as one-sided victor? A lot of people would argue yes. We know that authentic history is critical for human knowledge. This is how we, by the way, this is how humans learn and through history, is through stories and through telling those stories through history. And these records has to be true, has to be pure, have to be unbiased, which are standards very hard to actually reach, or impossible even to reach, to have this purity and unbiased. But if we look at the blockchain technology, an important emerging technology, it actually can help a lot in at least show us more complete picture by showing the different point of views, uncorrupted, and then you can make your own judgment on the history that we are talking about. So when we look at blockchain technologies, I'm gonna group blockchain, Web3, and NFTs because they are actually related, and of course the metaverse with them, because they are actually being used by, I will show you a couple of examples, or to discuss a couple of examples with you of how these different technologies can actually help record a better history. By focusing on history recording and applying the benefit of these technologies, we know what we know. I mean, you've been talking about it all week, about blockchain mostly. And let's talk about what are the benefits of blockchain. You know, it has the ability to democratize, and in different history and different industries, we talk, and you heard about the finance and how it's democratizing the finance, it's democratizing different industries. History is the same thing. You're democratizing history recording. So you're allowing different people to actually record the histories from their point of view, and nobody can corrupt it or change it. And this is a huge, because the decentralized architecture allow multiple parties to document history from their perspective. It allows us to store, share digital versions of history and culture items using the NFTs, the blockchains. It's not actually, the NFTs is used, and I will talk about it later. It is used not only to record, I mean to see images and graphics, but actually to record documents and any asset. When you look at history, any event is an asset, and that asset can actually be represented by NFT. Documents and share information about cultural sites and history assets using, again, the blockchain and the NFTs and the metaverse. It is not far into the future where you, the museum of the future, where you can actually walk into a metaverse and relive the human history 3,000 years ago, and you actually can experience what they have experienced back then. In addition to that, blockchain will allow us to save endangered cultural heritage, which is important. As you know, many of those cultural heritage actually disappeared or will be disappearing because a few people are practicing it, and because of wars or other events, even the movement of people and all that, these heritage, cultural heritage are disappearing. With blockchain, we actually can preserve this. What makes blockchain technologies very suitable is the characteristics of blockchain. I mean, every problem or issue I've been talking about with history, you can see that blockchain does a great job in doing that. It remain, for example, it's a ledger based, so it's like an event based. It's remain immutable, and it's accessible to the public with relevant, you can put additional information on it about the creator of that event. The openness increase the trust. It's very secure with the public key and the characteristic of the architecture, but it's also open. So this increases the trust because you can see it, and you can actually trace who wrote this data and who wrote this data about the history. So this works extremely well with the blockchain. On that, there are few interesting, because of time, I'm not going to be able to go in detail on this, but I'm going to give you the name of the projects, and you can actually look them up. But we have blockchain relics. It's a very interesting project. It was a digital archiving project to preserve culture and heritage by combining the passion for history with the power of the blockchain technology. They use 3D scanning and NFT technology, and it's supported by different communities, and they create this museum of the future kind of thing. It's very interesting project. It is supported by very large institutions and communities, and it brings basically this history to Web3 technologies. As the world keep creating the history, some of the existing historical buildings, monuments are removed. During the Black Lives Matter, they removed some statues from the US because they had roots to the Civil War, and these were actually destroyed. But they do have some of it on this platform, and you actually go and see the monument, even if it was removed and later on. So they have a lot of that. So it really, again, as I said, of course, it takes a lot of work to record, to scan the different monuments or the area and record a lot of information about them. So they're doing it with a lot of help on this. And it will be interesting to see how this project continue to evolve. History DAO and block history is another interesting project where basically the platform for minting, collecting, and trading the NFTs for the history. It allows you to record the history. They have a part of the platform called the block history where anybody can actually record a block of history from his point of view. And again, using the NFTs, etc. There is the Meta History Museum. And interesting, this is very current. Actually, some people call it the Museum of War. It started in Ukraine, where basically the Ukrainians are recording every event of the war. Of course, it's from the Ukrainian point of view, but it will be very interesting to have something similar from the Russian point of view. And if you put both together, then you look at and see how you can view the war. Their code on their website, it says, "We will never let any single day of the period disappear from the ledger of the world history." So it's again, it's a very interesting project to look at. Finally, there is a Hala Century system. This is actually a platform that is built so on Ethereum that allow you to monitor certain threats by bombs, by events, and give warnings, but it's recording these events, and it allow you to do analytics on the different events and etc. It's an indication and warning system that utilize multi-sensor network to generate a credible real-time situational awareness of threats in the toughest places. And it's actually been used across the world and with a great success. It's a low cost, exportable. You can take the platform, put it in different places, locally administratable knowledge platform designed to gather critical data. If you have, they actually do have analytics module. You can actually analyze the data and study it. What makes this project very interesting is the partners of this project who support it. You get the European Union, you get the USAID, you get the Global Affairs of Canada, and other international.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We only have 1 minute left.
Yeah, I'm actually done. So this is my last slide, and basically, I did not want to leave you that we have resolved the world problems. Blockchain very quickly still have some issues. We have a trust issue because, as you know, this is a platform. This is about sharing data, and what we always say, it depends on who puts the data in, junk out. So we have to make sure that the data that's put on the chain is actually accurate data, and this is a huge problem that the world is struggling with. You know, with the Facebook and other companies and what they got from the data that they have on their platform. So I don't think the world figured this out. We have the techno-optimism. It's very, what this means is that we don't, people get to think that this technology solves every problem, so they don't focus on other solutions which actually can bring good solutions to the table. Public blockchain scalability and performance, I'm sure you heard a lot about that. Industry development, we had a really tough week for this technology with what happened with the FTX, as you all know, and it's going to take us a while to recover and get people to trust this again. Although the assets, the actual technologies, the Bitcoins, the blockchains are not really involved, it's these centralized organizations that are doing the damage. But I think we have to go back to the origin ethos of blockchain and to the decentralized world. Finally, it's very, very important point. You got quantum computing, and quantum computing is threatening to break the public key algorithms, compromising blockchain security. Not a lot of people are talking about this. Not many solutions are being proposed, but this is a real threat. And until now, we have not seen a solution for that. So that's all what I have. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.